Welcome to another Apollo Papyrus podcast episode. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For this episode, my interview guest is a holistic healing expert who runs the holistic healing company Joyful Quantum Healing and is the author of the nonfiction book Joyfulfix: How to Break Free from Stagnation and Move Forward in Life. His name is Farzin Mazinani, and my interview with Farzin will follow the teleportation sound. Farzin Mazinani, welcome to the Apollo Papyrus podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
So, I call myself a limit buster. It means that we all have those kind of things that are pulling us back. And so somehow I'm specialized to just find those things and just move them from the way that people are progressing, and then it usually smashes the ceiling glass that we have, because the ceiling glass is something that we cannot see, but we still have something on top of our head, and it limits our movement. So I'm specialized in smashing those kind of ceiling glasses that we have.
Your book is called Joyfulfix: How to Break Free from Stagnation and Move Forward in Life. Without spoiling too much of your nonfiction book, what is it about?
So, as the subject says, it is about moving forward. And sometimes we get into the trap of stagnation. And based on whatever I explained in the book, we have three types of stagnation. The first type, I call it static stagnation. So what is a static stagnation? Static stagnation means that sometimes there are some changes in your life and you don't even feel like to get out of bed and you are stuck. So we go to those freeze modes. Sometimes based on the circumstances that we are experiencing, we are in the freeze mode. And so it is a stress response that we have. We feel that whatever we are facing is much larger than us, and then we surrender and we don't want to move. So I call that a static stagnation. And all of us have had those kind of periods. Sometimes it stays a little bit longer, but most of the time we have it for a while and then it goes away. But the other type of stagnation is dynamic stagnation. So what is dynamic stagnation? Dynamic is moving. We are moving in that state, but we are moving on a circle. It means that you feel like you are living your life based on whatever the society has asked you for. For example, I go to college and get a good job and I have a good income, and then I go to work and come back home. So every day I go and do the things that I do at work, and I come back home, do the things that I do at home. And then the day after is the same. And so I look back, few years has passed, there is no excitement, there is no movement, there is no progress on the things that I really wanted to do. And so there is no impact. So I call that dynamic stagnation. We are moving as we are doing our things, but we are moving as a hamster wheel is doing on a wheel. So the hamster is doing on a wheel. So I call that dynamic stagnation. And some people don't want to be in that state. So they say that I don't want to stay in my comfort zone. I want to expand myself. So they are high achievers. So what happens is that sometimes we are in that state. So we decide to build a business or do something extra to whatever that we normally do. So, and there is another phenomenon called inner stagnations. That is the third type of stagnation. What is that? That is for our high achievers. So we get out of our comfort zone, start to build something, an empire, a business, or whatever. So we are at the top. We built our business. We are successful. But the problem is that we might not be healthy because we sacrificed a lot of our energy on the business. We went through a lot of stress and anxiety, and that takes a toll on our body. So we might not be healthy. And the other scenario is that we were stealing a lot of time from the relationships that we had before to spend on the business. And that causes problem too. Why? Because we might be successful, but our relationships is not the same as before. So, and the another thing that might happen too, and that is we are on top of the mountain and we should feel happy in that state, but we are not. Because everybody told us that when you are in there, when you are successful, you're going to be happy. But that is the other way around. We have to start with the happiness. It is not at the end. Otherwise, we're going to be disappointed. We look inside that we are still empty. We might be successful, but we are empty. So those kind of scenarios all lead to the state of inner stagnation. So there are three types of stagnation.
One of your concepts is called a heart wall, and it does not refer literally to the walls of the human heart, but is rather a concept of yours that is unrelated to cardiology. What is a heart wall, and how can people dismantle their heart wall?
Sure. So heart wall, what is heart wall? First of all, we have to talk a little bit about heart, see what heart is. So our heart is very sensitive. Some people say that they experience something and they say that I'm heartbroken. My heart is broken. So let's see if that is literal or not. So there was a scientist who was a physician as well in Japan a few years ago. He discovered something interesting. He discovered that there are lines on our heart, just like the lines that we get on bone when we have a cracked bone. So when we put that cracked bone under the x-ray, we see those hairlines on the bone. So we recognize them as the sign for a fractured bone. And he noticed that there are lines on our heart, the same type of lines. So those are cardiologic signs that our heart can be broken. So it is different for everyone. So they're not the same. Based on our experiences in life and other things, we get those kind of lines on our heart. And there is a phenomenon called broken heart syndrome. It's a medical term. So we might get that chest pain and shortage of breathing. We cannot breathe, shortage of breath. And then we call the hospital and they say that you have to rush to the hospital because it's probably a heart attack. So we rush to the hospital, and what happens is that they examine our heart and they say it is not a heart attack, it's a broken heart syndrome, because the symptoms are exactly the same as heart attack, but it is broken heart syndrome. So our heart is very sensitive. So, and heart is very important organ because for every message that goes from brain to the heart, 9 messages go from heart to the brain. And scientists have measured those kind of things. So it is documented. So heart is important. How do we protect it? Let's say that I'm under a situation that is not pleasant. Maybe I lost a loved one, or I'm in the middle of breaking up with somebody. So, or I'm under pressure emotionally with somebody in as my close friend or something like that. So we might experience those kind of things in our life. So we have to protect our heart because our heart is sensitive. How do we protect it? We cannot protect it much, but our subconscious mind does something. Our subconscious mind grabs the trapped emotions that we have in our body. Everybody, on average, has more than 200 trapped emotions. So our subconscious mind grabs those and uses as a building block to create a shelter around our heart. So we feel a little bit safe and comfortable in that shelter. But the problem is that after that problem is past, we still keep that shell and keep that shelter, keep the chamber which is around our heart, an energetic chamber. So it is like, imagine that country is under attack, and then we go to the shelter to protect ourselves because they're shedding bombs all over the place. So we go to the shelter, and now 10 years has passed from the war, and we are still living in that shelter. So can you imagine that? So the same thing happens when we have a heart wall. And over 93% of the world have the heart wall. So why is it important to just pay attention to that? Because when we have a heart wall, we don't have access to the joy which is within our hearts. Because joy is different than happiness. Happiness depends upon outer circumstances. Sometimes you're happy, sometimes you're sad. But joy is different. Joy is accessible through our heart. And when we access that joy, which is in our heart, it doesn't matter what situation we're in. So it limits us to get access to the joy. What else? It limits us to get access to the wisdom as well, because wisdom is within our heart. Wisdom is different than knowledge. Knowledge is in the books, in the research that people publish, and those kind of things. But wisdom is different. So one idea can change the whole world. I give you an example. Airbnb was introduced by a couple of people, so they wanted to rent their room because they needed the money, and they did that, and then they decided maybe we can create a system so people can rent their room, or if they have an extra house, they can rent it out and stuff. So it took the whole world by like a wildfire. So that was just an idea, but they acted on it and they became a phenomenon. There are lots of things which is within us in the source of wisdom that we have, which is our heart. So if we be able to get access to the source of wisdom and the source of joy, can you imagine how far we can go in life? And we are limited for getting access by our heart wall. So it's important to be able to recognize that we have a heart wall, and it's important to be able to dismantle it.
How do you define holistic success?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what is holistic success? Does it make sense if I be successful but not happy? So I want to be successful and I want to be happy as well. Does it make sense if I be successful in my business but not healthy? No, I want to be healthy and successful. What about my relationships? So there are like four tires of a car. So health, wealth, relationship, and happiness. Those four tires. So when we are moving along with our car, what happens if we get a flat tire? We have to stop and fix that flat tire. Otherwise, we're not going to move. So we have to recognize where we are standing in life from the holistic perspective. So with that holistic perspective, those kind of four things, health, wealth, relationship, and happiness, those are the effects. Those are not the causes. So that's just a screen that we can see and capture things. So we have to assess those and see how we are doing on those aspects. And if one of the aspects is lower than the others, it means that we have to focus on that to bring it along with the other ones. Then we can have a holistic success. And another aspect of holistic success is with our different layers that we are wearing. We have the physical layer, emotional layer, mental layer, and a spiritual layer. So there are four aspects, and sometimes we might be physically strong, but emotionally or mentally we have some challenges. So it creates imbalance. So we have to just move in a way that all of those layers are in harmony with each other. Then we can call ourselves a successful person. So it is holistic. It is not just one aspect of our life.
What motivated you to write your nonfiction book, Joyful Fits, and how long did it take you to write it?
So it was a couple of years ago. There's a story behind it. So what happened was I went skiing because I love skiing. So I went. It was in the winter. So I went skiing with my son and with my brother. So we were on the slopes and we were going down, and I'm all of a sudden I fell down. I had one of those moments that I was flat on the ground, and then I started to just move my arm, and I noticed that I cannot move my arm. So somehow I couldn't get up. So I tried to manage to calm down and go to the hospital. And the doctor uh, sent me for MRI, and the results came back. And the surgeon says that you fractured your scapula. And I said, what is a scapula? And he explains that there is a big bone in the shoulder that's covered with muscles. And he says, this bone is fractured, but I've only seen this kind of fracture in car accidents. How did you manage to break it in skiing? I said, I wasn't even moving fast. I was almost on a flat surface, moving slowly, and then nobody was around me. And I've been skiing for more than 40 years, so I don't know how to manage those kind of, I don't fall easily. But I don't know what happened. I fell down, and that is the result. And he couldn't believe me. And when he said that this kind of fracture only happens in car accidents, I knew something is different about this experience, because I believe that life is my best friend. Life is not my enemy. If something happens to me, it is not to me, it's for me. So I was thinking, I'm receiving a gift in an ugly paper, because sometimes we know that there's a valuable gift, but it might be wrapped in an ugly paper. So I had a lot of pain, and the doctor says that we cannot do anything on that. It takes more than 6 months to be cured by itself. And he said that I'm going to give you those painkillers. And he gave me those painkillers, the strongest painkillers available. And he said that you're going to go through a lot of pain, because every slight movement on your arm is going to cause you to cry from pain. So he gave me those painkillers. I went home and I said, I cannot move my left arm, but I still can use my right hand. So what can I do with that? So I started writing and writing. Why? Because there are a lot of things in my mind that I wanted to bring to the paper. So I started writing. I went to the basement, wrote and wrote for long hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, and I noticed something. I noticed that when I'm writing, I don't even need to take the painkillers. And I'm not tired, and I don't know what time of the day or the night is, and I don't even need to eat anything. So those were the signs of being in the zone. I mentally knew that there is a phenomenon of flow state or being in a zone. I never had the direct experience with that. So that gave me the chance to experience that kind of thing. So I wrote and wrote and wrote. And after a couple of weeks, I produced a lot of writing and I sent it to the publisher. The publisher says, it's too much. You have to cut it down. We cannot put all those things in one book. So they made me to cut the book almost in half. So uh, for writing, it took me 2 weeks. For editing, it took me more than a month. So that is the funny part. But the thing is that when you are in that state, you are writing about something and you are amazed about whatever you're writing because it's not you. You are just a channel for that information that is coming out. So that accident helped me to create this book. So the gift that was in that ugly wrapping paper was my book.
Is your book Joyfulfix, is that self-published, traditionally published, or hybrid published? And what was it like getting your book published?
So I had a publisher, and the publisher was uh, just, I had a contract with the publisher to publish my book, the traditional publisher, and they were just asking me to write it, and I was somehow delaying the process. And until that thing happened, sometimes you're supposed to be doing something, it is in your mission in life, and then you delay that and then the life just forces you to go through that process in an express mode. So that's what happened. That is exactly what happened to me. So the life forced me to just finish up whatever I started long ago.
One final question. Besides writing, what do you like to do in your free time?
So I like nature. So I have a good connection with nature. When I go outside and I just walk in the nature, it gives me a good feeling. But not just the nature, everything. I just want to go outside and connect with people and the things that is around me. Because sometimes I have a feeling that I'm not separate from things that are around me. So it helps me to expand that kind of feeling. I go outside and feel that feeling that I am united with everything and everyone. And it gives me a very good feeling.
Farzin, thank you for appearing on the Apollo Papyrus podcast. You were an amazing guest.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Holistic healing is not a complete replacement for standard of care healthcare, but it was wonderful to interview Farzin about holistic healing in his book. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to find your writing and reading purpose. Bye for now. Copyright 2024, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.